The grinding noise started the moment I pressed the garage door opener. That familiar whir of the motor was replaced by something that sounded like metal teeth being stripped from their gears. I sat in my Ford Explorer, thumb still on the remote button, and pressed it again. The same mechanical protest echoed from inside the garage, followed by complete silence. "Fantastic," I muttered, pulling into the driveway instead of my usual spot inside. The digital clock on my dashboard read 4:30 p.m., exactly when I arrived home every Tuesday after my shift at Lockheed Martin's aerospace manufacturing facility. The October air carried that sharp bite that meant winter was approaching fast. I'd spent the last 12 hours troubleshooting a hydraulic system failure in one of our F-35 components, a problem that had stumped 3 other engineers before landing on my desk. The solution turned out to be elegantly simple: a miscalibrated pressure sensor that was sending false readings to the control system. But finding that needle in the haystack had consumed most of my day. I grabbed my laptop bag from the passenger seat and walked toward the garage, already mentally cataloging potential causes for that grinding sound. The opener was 8 years old, installed when we'd first bought the house. Chain drive system, if I remembered correctly. Probably a stripped gear in the drive mechanism, possibly a broken chain link, or worst case, motor failure. Rachel's Honda Civic was already parked inside, which struck me as odd. She typically left the garage space clear on days when she expected me home, parking her car in the driveway instead. Her routine was as predictable as mine. Work at Dr. Hendrick's dental office until 3 p.m. on Tuesdays and Thursdays, home by 3:30, dinner prep starting around 5 p.m. The manual release handle hung from its red cord near the center of the door. I grasped it with both hands and began lifting, immediately noticing the door felt heavier than usual. Another sign the spring system needed attention. Probably the torsion springs losing tension after 8 years of daily use. As the door rose to about 3 feet off the ground, something made me pause. The afternoon sunlight streaming under the partially opened door illuminated an unusual scene inside the garage. Rachel's car windows were completely fogged from the inside, condensation covering every surface. More concerning, the vehicle was moving with a subtle but unmistakable rhythmic motion. My engineering mind automatically processed the data. Fogged windows indicated significant temperature differential and elevated humidity levels inside the vehicle. Rhythmic vehicle movement suggested, well, there was really only one logical explanation for that particular combination of factors. I carefully lowered the door about 6 inches, leaving just enough gap to observe while remaining undetected. Through the clear space at the bottom, I had an unobstructed view of the backseat area of Rachel's sedan. 2 distinct silhouettes were clearly visible, engaged in activity that left no room for misinterpretation. My wife of 14 years was having an affair. In our garage. During her supposed sick day. The analytical part of my brain, the same systematic thinking that had identified countless mechanical failures over my career, began processing information with clinical precision. Timeline analysis. Rachel's Tuesday shift at the dental office officially ended at 3 p.m. My work schedule was completely predictable. I never arrived home before 5 p.m. unless there was an emergency. The garage provided complete privacy, weather protection, and easy access through the side door that connected to our backyard. I remained crouched beside the door for exactly 30 seconds, watching the rhythmic movement and listening to the muffled voices. 2 distinct speakers, one definitely Rachel's voice, the other belonging to a man I couldn't immediately identify. That was enough observation. Time for action. I yanked the garage door up violently, the metal mechanism screaming as it shot to the top with a thunderous crash that echoed through the entire space like a gunshot. What the hell is going on here? The reaction inside Rachel's car was immediate and explosive. 2 figures scrambled frantically in the back seat, a man's voice shouting, "Oh God!" while Rachel screamed. The car rocked wildly as both occupants desperately tried to cover themselves and figure out what was happening. The passenger door flew open and a man tumbled out, half-dressed and panicked. I got a clear view of his face in the harsh afternoon sunlight now flooding the garage. Tony Martinez, our United States Postal Service mail carrier for the past 4 years. 35 years old, married with 2 children, and currently trying to pull his postal uniform pants up while Rachel sat exposed in the back seat, clutching her blouse to her chest. Michael! Rachel's voice was pure panic. It's not what it looks like. It looks like you're screwing the mailman in our garage during your fake sick day, I said, my voice deadly calm despite the rage building in my chest. So unless you've got a different explanation, that's exactly what it is. Tony was frantically trying to get his uniform shirt on, his hands shaking so badly he could barely work the buttons. Michael, please, I can explain. Explain what, Tony? How you're using federal work time to have sex with married women. How you're operating a government vehicle for personal prostitution services. How you've been doing this on my property for weeks. It's not like that, man. It's exactly like that. I stepped closer to him, and Tony actually cowered against Rachel's car. You're a federal employee, you pathetic piece of garbage. Do you have any idea what you've just thrown away? Rachel was crying hysterically now, still trying to get dressed in the back seat. Michael, please, we can work this out. Work what out, Rachel? Your 3-month affair with a postal worker? Your fraudulent sick days? Your decision to turn our garage into a brothel? Don't call it that. What would you call it? You're meeting a government employee for sex during his work hours while lying to your employer about being sick. If there was money changing hands, it would literally be prostitution. Tony finally got his shirt buttoned and was reaching for his postal cap. Michael, I'm begging you, don't report this. I've got 12 years with the Postal Service. I've got kids. You had 12 years, Tony, past tense. And you had kids who could be proud of their father, also past tense. I pulled out my phone and held it up. Say cheese, you federal criminal. No, please don't. I snapped several photos of Tony in his disheveled postal uniform standing next to Rachel's car with fogged windows. Then I photographed his postal truck parked down the street. These photos are going to your postal supervisor first thing tomorrow morning, I said, along with a detailed timeline of your afternoon sex schedule and documentation of how you've been stealing government time. Tony's knees gave out, and he sank to the garage floor. Please, Michael, I'll do anything. I'll never see Rachel again. I'll transfer routes. You'll be unemployed and facing federal criminal charges. That's what you'll be. I turned to Rachel, who had managed to get her clothes back on but was still crying uncontrollably. And you, my cheating wife, are going to pack your bags and get out of my house. Tonight. Michael, you can't just... I can, and I am. This house is in my name only, remember? And I now have photographic evidence of you committing adultery on my property with a federal employee who was supposed to be working. Tony tried to stand up. Where am I supposed to go? How do I explain this to Maria? That's not my problem anymore, Tony. But here's some free advice. When the postal inspector calls you in for questioning, and they will, tell them the truth. It might help reduce your prison sentence. Prison? Federal time theft, misuse of government property, dereliction of duty. Yeah, Tony, prison. Real federal prison with real federal prisoners. Rachel stumbled out of her car, still crying. Michael, please, we can go to counseling. We can fix this. There's nothing to fix, Rachel. You made your choice. Tony made his choice. Now you both get to live with the consequences. I looked at both of them with disgust. You have exactly 1 hour to get off my property, Tony. And Rachel, you have exactly 2 hours to pack whatever you can carry and find somewhere else to live. But where am I supposed to go? Call Tony's wife. Maybe she'll let you both stay with her when she finds out why her husband just lost his federal job and benefits. Tony's face went white. You can't tell Maria. I'm not telling Maria anything. You are. Because if you don't tell her tonight, she's going to find out tomorrow when the postal inspectors start interviewing everyone connected to this case. I stepped back and gestured toward the garage door. Both of you get out. Now. Before I decide to call the police about trespassing and public indecency. Tony stumbled toward his postal truck like a broken man, while Rachel ran toward the house, still sobbing hysterically. I stood in the garage, looking at the evidence of their betrayal scattered around Rachel's car, tissues, displaced floor mats, the lingering smell of cologne and sex, and felt a cold satisfaction settling in my chest. The systematic destruction of their lives was just beginning. I waited another 10 minutes to ensure Tony was completely gone, then walked to the front door and entered the house through the main entrance. The shower was running upstairs. Rachel engaged in post-encounter cleanup, no doubt. Michael? Is that you? Her voice called from the master bathroom. Yeah, just got home. Having some trouble with the garage door opener. Oh no! What kind of trouble? Is it something serious? I'll figure it out. Sounds like a mechanical problem. Do you need to call a repair service? No, I can handle it myself. Just need to take a closer look. I sat in our living room staring at the collection of family photos arranged on the fireplace mantel while the shower continued running upstairs. 14 years of marriage documented in those frames. Our wedding day at St. Mary's Catholic Church. Vacation photos from Yellowstone, the Grand Canyon, Niagara Falls. The housewarming party when we'd first moved to this neighborhood. Rachel's graduation from dental assistant school. My promotion to senior mechanical engineer 3 years ago. All of it built on what I now realized had been a foundation with serious structural flaws. The shower stopped running. I heard the familiar sound of the hairdryer starting up, Rachel's complete post-shower routine, which typically took 25 minutes. She was being thorough about eliminating any physical evidence of her afternoon activities. When she finally came downstairs 30 minutes later, she looked exactly like someone who had spent the afternoon at home recovering from illness. Comfortable sweatpants, oversized t-shirt, slightly damp hair pulled back in a casual ponytail, and that pale complexion that suggested she hadn't been feeling well. "How are you feeling now?" I asked, studying her face carefully. "Much better, actually." I thought it was going to be one of those terrible migraine days, but whatever it was seems to have passed. I even managed to get out of the house for a little while this afternoon. "Really? That's good to hear. Sometimes fresh air and a change of scenery can help with headaches." She nodded enthusiastically. "Exactly. I just took a short drive around the neighborhood. Nothing strenuous, just enough to clear my head and get some sunlight." "Smart thinking. Did the drive help?" "Definitely. I feel almost normal now. Sorry I had to call in sick to Dr. Hendrick's office, but I really thought I was going to be down for the count all day." I stood up from the couch. "I'm going to take a look at that garage door before dinner. Want to diagnose the problem while there's still daylight." "Oh, don't worry about it tonight, honey. You've been working all day and you look tired. It'll just take a few minutes. I want to see exactly what's wrong with the opener mechanism." I walked through the kitchen and opened the connecting door to the garage. Rachel's Honda was parked in its usual spot, but now I noticed details that had escaped my attention this morning. The windows were clear now, but there were several tissues scattered on the backseat floor that definitely hadn't been there when she'd left for work. The passenger side floor mat was slightly displaced, and the seatbelt was twisted in a way that suggested recent use. More significantly, I detected a faint cologne scent lingering in the air. Not my cologne. Something citrusy and inexpensive. Government employee cologne, I thought with dark amusement. I spent 20 minutes conducting a thorough examination of the garage door opener, though I'd already identified the problem as a worn drive gear that would cost about $30 to replace at the hardware store. The inspection gave me time to look for additional evidence while maintaining my cover story. I found several small details that confirmed my suspicions. Fresh tire tracks on the garage floor from a vehicle that had been moved recently. A small scuff mark on the concrete where someone had likely stepped out of a car. Most telling, a partial footprint in a small puddle of condensation that had dripped from Rachel's car. A boot print that was definitely not mine or Rachel's. When I returned to the house, Rachel was in the kitchen preparing dinner, humming quietly to herself. She seemed more relaxed and affectionate than she'd been in weeks, which I now understood was likely guilt-driven compensatory behavior. "Find the problem with the door?" she asked, looking up from the vegetables she was chopping. "Yeah, just a worn gear in the drive mechanism. Simple fix. I'll pick up the part tomorrow and have it working again by the weekend." "You're so handy with mechanical things. I don't know what I'd do without you." The irony of her statement wasn't lost on me, but I simply nodded and went upstairs to change out of my work clothes. That evening proceeded normally on the surface. We ate dinner together, watched our usual Tuesday night television programs, and went to bed at our customary time. Rachel seemed more physically affectionate than she'd been in recent months, initiating intimate contact for the first time in weeks. But I didn't sleep. Instead, I lay awake until 3 a.m., formulating a comprehensive strategy using the same systematic problem-solving methodology I applied to complex engineering challenges. Step 1. Gather additional evidence and confirm the pattern of behavior. Step 2. Identify all stakeholders and potential consequences. Step 3. Develop and execute a solution that addressed all aspects of the problem. By morning, I had developed a detailed plan of action. I left for work at my usual time Wednesday morning, but instead of driving directly to the Lockheed facility, I made a detour to the downtown public library. Using one of their computers, I researched Federal Postal Service employment regulations, adultery laws in our state, and the legal implications of using sick leave for personal activities. The information I gathered was enlightening. United States Postal Service employees fall under strict federal conduct guidelines. Using work time for personal activities constitutes theft of government services. Operating a government vehicle for non-official purposes violates federal transportation regulations. The combination of both infractions could result in criminal charges, not just employment termination. At work, I maintained my normal routine while conducting additional research during lunch break. I learned that postal inspectors take misconduct cases very seriously, particularly when they involve misuse of government resources. I also discovered that our state had specific adultery statutes that could affect divorce proceedings, especially when documented evidence was available. Wednesday afternoon, I left work 15 minutes early and positioned myself in a location where I could observe our street without being detected. At exactly 3:45 p.m., Tony's mail truck appeared, following the same route as always. He parked in the same spot, 3 houses down from ours, and walked casually toward our property carrying a small package as a prop. I watched him disappear around the side of our house, using the backyard entrance to access the garage. This time, I was prepared with my phone's camera, set to silent mode, and ready to document evidence. I approached the garage from the front, staying low and moving quietly. The same scene was unfolding. Fogged windows, rhythmic vehicle movement, muffled voices from inside Rachel's car. I carefully raised the door just enough to slide my phone underneath, capturing several clear photographs that showed 2 people engaged in intimate activity in the back seat. At 4:25 p.m., Tony emerged from the garage, again adjusting his uniform and checking his appearance before returning to his postal truck. I documented his departure with additional photos, showing him in his USPS uniform, leaving our property and returning to his government vehicle. The entire sequence had taken exactly 40 minutes. Long enough for a significant encounter, but short enough to avoid disrupting Tony's official delivery schedule. Instead of going directly home, I drove to a FedEx office store and printed copies of all the photographs, ensuring I had physical documentation that couldn't be accidentally deleted or lost. The images clearly showed the timeline, location, and participants in the ongoing affair. Thursday morning, I arrived at work early and used my lunch break to visit the main United States Postal Service facility downtown. I asked to speak with a supervisor about mail delivery irregularities in my neighborhood, explaining that I'd noticed inconsistent timing and wanted to understand the official delivery schedule. The duty supervisor, a stern-looking woman named Mrs. Rodriguez, was very helpful. Route 47C covers your area, she explained, consulting a computer terminal. Carrier Martinez typically completes that section between 3:30 and 4:15 p.m., depending on package volume and traffic conditions. Is it normal for carriers to make extended stops at individual addresses? What do you mean by extended? I've noticed the mail truck parked in our area for 30 to 40 minutes on some days, but we don't usually receive packages that would require that much time. Mrs. Rodriguez frowned. That's unusual. Standard residential delivery should take no more than 2 or 3 minutes per address, even with multiple packages. Let me make a note to review the route timing reports. I don't want to get anyone in trouble, I said carefully. I was just curious about the procedures. You're not getting anyone in trouble, Mr. Torres. We appreciate citizens who pay attention to service quality. If there are timing irregularities, we need to investigate them. Thursday afternoon, I again left work early and confirmed that the pattern was consistent. Tony arrived at 3:45 p.m., spent approximately 40 minutes in our garage with Rachel, and departed by 4:30 p.m. I gathered additional photographic evidence and documented the exact timeline. By Thursday evening, I had compiled a comprehensive file, photographs showing the affair in progress, documentation of Tony's work schedule and route, evidence of Rachel's fraudulent use of sick time, and research on the legal implications of federal employee misconduct. Friday morning, I put the plan into motion. First, I called Dr. Patricia Hendricks' dental office and asked to speak with her directly. Dr. Hendricks was a respected professional in her 50s who had built her practice on integrity and reliability. Dr. Hendricks, this is Michael Torres, Rachel's husband. I need to discuss a serious matter regarding Rachel's recent sick leave usage. Of course, Michael. What's your concern? Rachel has been calling in sick on Tuesdays and Thursdays for the past several weeks, claiming to have severe migraines. However, I've discovered that she's been using these sick days to conduct a personal affair in our garage with our postal mail carrier. There was a long silence before Dr. Hendricks responded. That's a very serious accusation, Michael. Are you absolutely certain about this? I have photographic evidence and documented timeline information. The affair has been occurring during her scheduled sick time, using fraudulent medical claims to justify her absence from work. I see. This is indeed a serious matter. Using sick leave for non-medical purposes violates our employment policies and constitutes fraud. Can you provide me with the documentation you mentioned? I can email you the timeline information, but the photographic evidence is sensitive material that I'd prefer to show you in person if necessary. Email me what you can, Michael. I'll need to review this matter thoroughly before taking any action. There's one more thing you should know, Dr. Hendricks. The man she's been meeting is a federal postal employee who's using government work time and vehicles for personal activities. This situation may involve federal misconduct charges. Another pause. I appreciate you bringing this to my attention directly rather than letting me discover it through other channels. Rachel will need to come in Monday morning for a disciplinary meeting. My second call was to my attorney, Robert Oliver, whom I'd used for the house purchase and will preparation. I explained the situation and asked about divorce proceedings in cases involving documented adultery. Michael, you're in a very strong legal position, he said after I'd outlined the facts. Your state has fault-based divorce laws, and documented adultery significantly impacts property division and alimony considerations. The fact that her affair involved fraudulent use of sick time also strengthens your case. What about the federal employee aspect? That's interesting. If her paramour faces federal charges, it could actually complicate things for Rachel. She might be considered a co-conspirator if she knowingly participated in the misuse of government resources. How long would divorce proceedings typically take? With clear evidence of adultery and no children involved, we could have everything finalized within 90 days if she doesn't contest the filing. Given the circumstances, she'd be wise to settle quickly and quietly. Friday afternoon, I implemented the next phase of my plan. Instead of going to work, I positioned myself to observe the 3:45 p.m. meeting between Rachel and Tony. This time, however, I had a different objective. At 4:20 p.m., as Tony emerged from the garage and began walking toward his postal truck, I stepped out from behind my neighbor's fence where I'd been waiting. "Afternoon, Tony," I said in a conversational tone. He froze mid-step, his face immediately draining of color. "Oh, hey, Michael. I had a package delivery for your address." "Interesting delivery method you've developed?" "What do you mean?" His voice was barely above a whisper. I held up my phone, displaying one of the clearer photographs from Wednesday. The image showed two silhouettes in intimate embrace inside a vehicle, though specific faces weren't visible due to the fogged windows. "Your postal supervisor might find these delivery documentation photos quite educational." Tony's knees actually buckled. He grabbed the side of his mail truck for support, his face now completely white. "Michael, please, I can explain." "You're a federal employee, Tony. United States Postal Service, correct? How many years have you been with the service?" 12 years, he whispered. "Federal benefits package? Health insurance for your family? Pension plan?" He nodded weakly, unable to speak. "Here's your situation," I continued, using the same calm, analytical tone I employed when explaining technical problems to junior engineers. "You've been using government work time to conduct personal affairs. You've been operating a federal vehicle for non-official purposes. You've been neglecting your assigned duties to engage in activities that have nothing to do with mail delivery." Tony opened his mouth to respond, but I held up my hand to stop him. "Those aren't just violations of Postal Service employment policies, Tony. They're federal crimes: theft of government services, misuse of federal property, dereliction of duty. The Postal Inspector's Office takes these matters very seriously, especially when there's documented evidence of systematic misconduct. Please, Michael, I never meant for this to happen. How it happened is irrelevant now. What matters is that you have exactly 24 hours to submit your resignation to your postal supervisor. Immediate resignation. Effective immediately, no questions asked. But my job, my benefits, my family? If you resign immediately, you might be able to avoid criminal prosecution. If you don't resign, I'll be filing a formal complaint with the United States Postal Inspection Service first thing Monday morning, complete with photographic evidence, documented timeline information, and witness testimony. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. Let me be very clear about your options, Tony. Option 1. You walk into your supervisor's office tomorrow morning and submit a resignation letter citing personal reasons. You lose your job and benefits, but you avoid federal criminal charges. Option 2. You try to ride this out, and by Monday afternoon you're under federal investigation for multiple felonies. What about Rachel? What happens to her? That's not your concern anymore. Your concern is deciding whether you want to face this as an unemployed man or as a federal defendant. Tony was shaking now, fully understanding the magnitude of his situation. How did you find out? That's also not your concern. What matters is that I know, I have evidence, and I'm prepared to use it. 24 hours, Tony. Make the smart choice. I turned and walked toward my house, leaving him standing beside his postal truck, looking like his entire world had just collapsed around him. Friday evening brought the most challenging part of the operation: confronting Rachel. She was in the kitchen preparing dinner when I entered through the front door, humming the same tune she'd been humming the previous evening. She looked up with her usual bright smile, the same smile that had greeted me for 14 years of marriage. "Hi, honey. How was your day at work?" "Very productive. Extremely productive, actually. How was your day? Feeling better after yesterday's illness?" "Oh, much better. I had another one of those headache episodes this morning, so I called in sick again, but it cleared up by afternoon. I even managed to get some fresh air and sunshine." "That's wonderful. Did you go for another drive around the neighborhood?" "You know me so well." "Just a short one. Nothing too strenuous." I sat down at the kitchen table, the same table where we'd shared thousands of meals over the years. "Rachel, we need to have a serious conversation." Something in my tone made her look up sharply from the stove. "About what?" "About your afternoon drives around the neighborhood." Her hand froze on the wooden spoon she'd been using to stir pasta sauce. "I don't understand what you mean." I placed my phone on the table and showed her the clearest photograph from Wednesday afternoon. Her face went completely white as she recognized the interior of her own car and the unmistakable silhouettes in the back seat. "How long has this been going on, Rachel?" The spoon clattered to the floor as she sank into the chair across from me. "Michael, I can explain." "How long?" "3 months," she whispered, tears already starting to form in her eyes. "Every Tuesday and Thursday?" She nodded, unable to look at me directly. "While calling in sick to Dr. Hendrick's office with fake migraine claims?" Another nod. "Using our garage as a meeting location with the United States Postal Service employee who's supposed to be delivering mail?" It just happened," she said, the tears flowing freely now. "We started talking when he delivered packages, and he was so sweet and funny, and then one day he asked if we could meet somewhere private, and I thought maybe just once." Just once became 3 months of systematic deception. The clinical accuracy of my statement seemed to hit her like a physical blow. She began crying harder, her entire body shaking. "Tony lost his job today," I continued. "He submitted his resignation to the Postal Service to avoid federal criminal charges for misconduct." Rachel's head snapped up. "What do you mean, federal charges?" "Using government work time for personal activities is theft of government services. Operating a federal vehicle for non-official purposes violates transportation regulations. Tony chose to resign rather than face prosecution, but he's lost 12 years of federal service, his pension, his health benefits, and his career." "You got him fired?" Her voice was barely audible. "I gave him a choice. resign immediately, or face federal investigation. He made the intelligent decision. His wife and 2 children are probably wondering right now why Daddy suddenly quit his stable government job with excellent benefits. Rachel stared at me in shock, seemingly unable to process the full implications of what I was telling her. Dr. Hendricks knows about your fraudulent sick leave usage, I continued. You'll be meeting with her Monday morning to discuss your employment status. Using sick time for personal affairs violates your office policies and constitutes fraud. Michael, please, you can't destroy my whole life over this. I didn't destroy anything, Rachel. You made a series of calculated decisions over 3 months. You chose to lie to your employer. You chose to commit fraud by using sick time for personal activities. You chose to help a federal employee violate his oath of service. Those were your decisions, and now you're experiencing the logical consequences. I stood up from the table. Pack a suitcase, Rachel. You have 2 hours to gather whatever you need for the immediate future. Where am I supposed to go? That's no longer my problem. Maybe Tony needs company while he's job hunting and explaining to his wife why he threw away his federal career for afternoon meetings in suburban garages. She stared at me in disbelief. You can't just throw me out of our home. Actually, I can. This house is titled solely in my name. Remember when we had to refinance 5 years ago due to your credit issues? You're not on the mortgage, you're not on the deed, and I have documented evidence of adultery committed on the property. In this state, that gives me considerable legal authority to revoke your residence privileges. I walked toward the stairs, then paused. 2 hours, Rachel. After that, the locks get changed and your belongings get packed for you. The next hour was filled with various attempts at negotiation. Rachel tried pleading, bargaining, anger, promises to end the affair immediately, suggestions for marriage counseling, and emotional manipulation. I listened to all of it with the same detached attention I gave to equipment that was malfunctioning beyond repair. This is just a mistake, Michael. Everyone makes mistakes. We can work through this. This wasn't a mistake, Rachel. A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk from the grocery store. This was a systematic pattern of deception, fraud, and betrayal that lasted 3 months and involved federal crimes. It doesn't mean anything, it was just physical. I love you, not him. If it didn't mean anything, then you destroyed our marriage, your career, and Tony's federal employment for something meaningless. That actually makes it worse, not better. Please, we can go to counseling, I'll do anything. There's nothing to counsel, Rachel. You made your choices. Tony made his choices. Now you both get to live with the consequences of those choices. At exactly 8 p.m., Rachel loaded 2 large suitcases and several boxes into her Honda Civic. She was crying as she backed out of the driveway, but I felt no emotional response watching her leave. The marriage had been terminated by her actions months ago. I was simply making the situation officially accurate. I changed all the door locks by 10 p.m. and reset the garage door opener codes by 10:30. The house felt remarkably peaceful without the underlying tension I now realized had been present for months. Saturday morning brought a series of important phone calls that would solidify the consequences for everyone involved in the deception. My first call was to Rachel's mother, Elizabeth Patterson. Mrs. Patterson was a traditional woman in her 70s who took marriage vows and family values very seriously. She answered on the second ring. Mrs. Patterson, this is Michael. I wanted you to hear this directly from me before you heard it through family gossip. Rachel and I are getting divorced. There was a long pause. Oh my goodness, Michael. What happened? Rachel has been having an affair for the past 3 months with our postal mail carrier. She's been using fraudulent sick leave to meet him in our garage during work hours. Are you absolutely certain about this? I have photographic evidence and documented proof. The affair cost the postal worker his federal job. He had to resign yesterday to avoid criminal prosecution for misconduct. Rachel's also been fired from Dr. Hendricks' office for using fake sick time to conduct the affair. Mrs. Patterson was silent for nearly a minute. I don't understand how Rachel could do such a thing. Her father and I raised her better than that. I know you did, Mrs. Patterson. This was Rachel's choice to make, and she chose to betray our marriage vows and commit fraud against her employer. Where is she now? She moved out last night. She's staying with Susan temporarily, but She'll need to find her own place since she's unemployed now. Michael, I am so sorry. You've been nothing but a good husband to Rachel. She doesn't deserve your forgiveness after this. I appreciate you saying that, Mrs. Patterson. I wanted you to know the truth before Rachel had a chance to present her own version of events. My second call was to my own mother in Phoenix. Mom, I have some difficult news to share. Rachel and I are getting divorced. She's been having an affair. Oh, Michael, I'm so sorry. Are you okay? I'm handling it systematically. The situation involved some illegal activities, so there are serious consequences for the people involved. What kind of illegal activities? Rachel was defrauding her employer by using sick time for personal affairs, and the man she was meeting is a federal postal worker who was using government time and vehicles for personal activities. He lost his job and may face criminal charges. Good heavens, Rachel seemed like such a sweet girl. People aren't always what they appear to be, Mom. I'm filing for divorce immediately based on documented adultery. The legal process should be straightforward. Do you need me to come out there for support? No, I'm fine. I have everything under control. I just wanted you to know what was happening. My third call was to our pastor, Reverend Williams at St. Mary's Catholic Church, where Rachel and I had been married and had attended services for 8 years. Reverend Williams, this is Michael Torres. I need to inform you that Rachel and I are separating. She's been having an extramarital affair. Oh, Michael, I'm deeply saddened to hear this. How can the church support you during this difficult time? I appreciate the offer, Reverend. Right now, I'm just taking things one step at a time and handling the practical matters. I wanted you to know directly so you'd understand why Rachel won't be attending services anymore. Of course. Will you continue to be part of our congregation? Absolutely. This church and community have been important to me, and I'm not going to let someone else's poor choices drive me away from my faith community. That's a mature and faithful attitude, Michael. Please know that you have our full support during this transition. By noon Saturday, I'd also informed our immediate neighbors, Jim and Sarah Henderson on the left side of our house, and Bill and Mary Chapman on the right side. We're shocked, Sarah Henderson said when I explained the situation. Rachel always seemed so devoted to you and your marriage. People can be very good at maintaining appearances while living completely different private lives, I replied. Is it true that the postal worker lost his job? Jim Henderson asked. Yes. Using federal work time and vehicles for personal affairs is a serious violation. He resigned to avoid criminal prosecution. Well, good, Mary Chapman interjected. Federal employees should be held to higher standards. We pay their salaries through our taxes. Word spread through our tight-knit neighborhood with remarkable efficiency. By Sunday morning, every house on our street knew that the Torres marriage had ended due to Rachel's affair with the postal carrier, who had subsequently lost his federal job due to misconduct. The general reaction was strongly supportive of my position and highly critical of both Rachel and Tony's behavior. In our suburban community, marriage vows and professional integrity were taken seriously. Sunday morning, I attended church alone for the first time in 8 years. The experience was unexpectedly positive. Several congregation members approached me after the service to express support and sympathy. Michael, we heard about your situation, said Margaret Walsh, a longtime church member whose daughter Jennifer worked as an engineer at a competing aerospace company. We want you to know that you have our prayers and support. Thank you, Margaret. I appreciate the kind words. Jennifer mentioned that she knows you professionally. She's heard excellent things about your work at Lockheed. She said you have a reputation for integrity and problem-solving skills. That's nice to hear. Engineering is all about systematic approaches to complex problems. Well, it sounds like you're applying that same systematic thinking to your personal challenges. That takes real strength of character. Reverend Williams also spoke with me privately after the service. Michael, I want you to know that the church community stands behind you completely. Marriage is a sacred covenant, and when one partner violates that covenant through adultery, the faithful spouse deserves our full support. I appreciate that, Reverend. I'm not looking for sympathy, just understanding. You have both. And if you ever need pastoral counseling or just someone to talk through your feelings, my door is always open. Monday morning brought the consequences I'd set in motion for both Rachel and Tony. Dr. Patricia Hendricks called Rachel into the dental office at 8 a.m. sharp. Rachel arrived expecting a routine conversation about her recent sick leave usage. Instead, she found herself facing immediate termination. At 8:30 a.m., my phone rang. "Michael, she fired me." Rachel's voice was hysterical. "Dr. Hendricks fired me on the spot. She said I committed fraud and that she couldn't trust me anymore." "What exactly did you expect to happen, Rachel?" "You lied to your employer repeatedly over a 3-month period." "But I need this job. How am I supposed to pay rent or buy food or—" "You should have considered those practical matters before you started your garage meetings with Tony. Can't you call Dr. Hendricks and tell her it was all a misunderstanding?" "It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a calculated pattern of deception and fraud. Those are the employment consequences of your choices. This is destroying my entire life." "No, Rachel. Your choices destroyed your life. I simply documented what you'd already done." She hung up but called back 20 minutes later. "Michael, please, you have to help me. I can't find anywhere to rent an apartment without a job, and I can't get a job without references from Dr. Hendricks, and she says she can't give me a positive reference after what happened. That's called facing the logical consequences of your actions. But what am I supposed to do? That's no longer my concern, Rachel. You're an adult who made adult decisions. Now you get to handle adult consequences." At 2 p.m., I received a call from Tony Martinez. His voice sounded like he'd been crying. "Michael, please, I'm begging you. I need my job back. My wife is talking about divorce. My kids are asking why I'm home all day and nobody will hire me." "You resigned from your federal position to avoid criminal prosecution, Tony. That was your choice. But you forced me to resign. I never would have quit if you hadn't threatened me." "I didn't force anything. I simply explained the legal consequences of your actions and gave you a choice between resignation and federal investigation. You chose resignation. Can't you withdraw the complaint or tell them it was all a misunderstanding?" "There was no formal complaint filed, Tony. You resigned before any official investigation began. But your resignation is permanent, and your federal employment record will show that you left under circumstances that preclude rehiring. My family is falling apart. My wife says she can't trust me anymore, and the kids don't understand why I'm not working. Your family deserved better than a husband and father who was having affairs during work hours using government resources. Just like my marriage deserved better than a wife who was committing fraud to meet you in our garage. Please, isn't there anything you can do?" "There's nothing to do, Tony. You made your choices, Rachel made her choices, and now you both get to live with the consequences of those choices for the rest of your lives." He hung up without saying goodbye. Tuesday brought an unexpected development that significantly escalated the situation beyond anything I'd anticipated. At 10 a.m., I received a visit at my office from Agent Sarah Kim of the United States Postal Inspection Service. She was a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s with the professional bearing of someone who'd spent years investigating federal crimes. "Mr. Torres? I'm Agent Kim with the Postal Inspection Service. I understand you may have information about irregularities in mail delivery in your neighborhood." "Please have a seat," I said, gesturing to the conference chair in my office. "What kind of irregularities are you investigating?" "We've received complaints about delayed mail delivery on Route 47C, which covers your residential area. Additionally, the sudden resignation of Carrier Martinez has raised some questions that we're required to investigate." I provided Agent Kim with a complete and accurate account of what I'd observed and documented. The photographic evidence, the timeline information, the systematic pattern of misconduct, and Tony's immediate resignation when confronted with the evidence. "This is very helpful information," she said, taking detailed notes. "The timing correlates with several complaints we've received about late mail delivery on Tuesdays and Thursdays over the past few months." "Is Tony in serious legal trouble?" "Using government time and vehicles for personal activities is a federal violation, Mr. Torres. If we can establish a clear pattern of misconduct, it could result in criminal charges for theft of government services." She continued, "We're also concerned about whether this behavior extended beyond your specific situation. Federal employees who violate their oath of service in one area often have broader patterns of misconduct." "What about my wife?" Does she face any legal consequences? Potentially, yes. If she knowingly participated in the misuse of federal resources, she could be considered complicit in the violations. We'll need to interview her as part of our investigation. Agent Kim left my office with copies of all my documentation and a promise to keep me informed of any developments that might require my testimony. That afternoon, I received another hysterical phone call from Rachel. Michael, a federal agent, came to see me. She said I might be charged with helping Tony commit federal crimes. This is insane. Agent Kim is thorough and professional. Just tell her the truth about what happened. The truth is that I'm facing federal criminal charges because you couldn't handle the fact that I made a mistake. The truth is that you're facing federal criminal charges because you chose to participate in a federal employee's misconduct for 3 months. I didn't know it was illegal. You knew Tony was supposed to be delivering mail during work hours, Rachel. You knew he was using his postal truck to travel to our house for personal reasons. You knew he was neglecting his federal duties to spend time with you. Ignorance of federal law isn't a defense. She hung up again, but the calls continued over the next several days as the federal investigation gathered momentum. Agent Kim's investigation revealed information that I found both surprising and deeply troubling. Tony Martinez hadn't just been having an affair with Rachel. He'd been using his postal route as a personal dating service, meeting multiple women during work hours over a period of 8 months. We've identified at least 6 different addresses where Martinez made regular extended stops that had nothing to do with mail delivery, Agent Kim informed me during a follow-up interview. Your situation appears to be part of a much larger pattern of systematic misconduct. 6 different women? 6 different addresses. Some may have involved the same woman multiple times, but our preliminary investigation suggests Martinez was conducting affairs with at least 4 different married women along his route. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Rachel hadn't been involved in a romantic affair that had developed into something serious. She'd been one of multiple women that Tony was meeting during his work hours, basically a scheduled appointment in his afternoon rotation of suburban housewives. Were the other women also using fraudulent sick leave to meet him? That's still under investigation, but initial interviews suggest that several of them had established patterns of availability during afternoon hours when their husbands were at work. Agent Kim continued, "This case has become quite significant within our office, Mr. Torres. Systematic misuse of federal resources on this scale is rare, and the involvement of multiple civilian co-conspirators makes it even more serious." When I informed Rachel about this new development, her reaction was explosive. Multiple women? You mean he was doing this with other people too? According to the Postal Inspection Service, you were one of at least 4 women Tony was meeting during work hours. That lying, cheating bastard? He told me I was special, that he'd never felt this way about anyone before. The irony of Rachel calling someone else a lying cheater seemed completely lost on her. I thought we had something real, something meaningful. What you had was a scheduled appointment in a federal employee's misconduct rotation. You were Tuesday and Thursday from 3:45 to 4:30. Someone else probably had Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. She began crying, but this time it seemed more from humiliation than grief. By the end of October, the full scope of consequences had become clear for everyone involved in the situation. Tony Martinez was arrested and charged with multiple federal offenses: theft of government services, misuse of federal property, dereliction of duty, and mail fraud. The charges carried potential sentences ranging from 18 months to 5 years in federal prison, plus substantial fines and restitution requirements. The arrest made the local newspaper, with Tony identified as a postal worker who had been charged with using his mail route to conduct affairs with multiple married women. The story went viral on social media, turning Tony into a local symbol of federal employee misconduct and moral failure. His wife, Maria Martinez, filed for divorce immediately after his arrest, seeking full custody of their 2 children and citing his criminal charges as evidence of unfitness as a father. She also filed for emergency spousal support, claiming that Tony's criminal behavior had left the family financially destitute. Rachel and 3 other women were named as co-conspirators in the federal case, facing potential charges for participating in the systematic misuse of government resources. The prosecutor indicated that cooperation with the investigation might result in reduced charges or suspended sentences, but all four women were facing federal criminal records regardless. Dr. Patricia Hendricks had terminated Rachel immediately upon learning of the fraud, and word of Rachel's involvement in a federal criminal case had spread throughout the local dental community. No other dental office in town would consider hiring her, effectively ending her career in the field she'd worked in for 6 years. Rachel was forced to take a minimum wage job at a retail clothing store in the mall, earning less than one-third of her previous dental office salary. The background check for the retail position had revealed her pending federal charges, but the store manager hired her anyway because they had difficulty finding employees willing to work for such low wages. She'd also been forced to rent a studio apartment in a less desirable part of town, the only landlord willing to rent to someone with no employment history, no references, and pending federal charges. Meanwhile, my own situation had stabilized and actually improved significantly. The divorce proceedings moved smoothly through the court system, with Rachel unable to contest the adultery charges or fight for significant asset division given her documented misconduct. I retained the house, both vehicles, all our joint savings accounts, and our investment portfolio. Rachel received only her personal possessions and a small cash settlement that barely covered the deposit on her studio apartment. My colleagues at Lockheed Martin had been uniformly supportive throughout the entire process. Several supervisors mentioned that my systematic, professional handling of a personal crisis demonstrated exactly the kind of problem-solving skills they valued in senior engineering positions. In November, when a promotion opportunity arose for engineering manager of advanced propulsion systems, I was the unanimous choice of the selection committee. The promotion came with a substantial salary increase, expanded responsibilities, and oversight of a 12-person team working on classified aerospace projects. Michael, your approach to crisis management over the past few months has been exemplary, said my director during the promotion announcement. You've demonstrated the kind of analytical thinking and systematic problem-solving that we need in leadership positions. The social response in our community was equally positive. Our church congregation had rallied around me as the faithful spouse who'd been betrayed, and several families had made a point of including me in social gatherings and holiday events. You handled this situation with real class, said Jim Henderson during a neighborhood barbecue in November. A lot of men would have just gotten angry and done something stupid. You approached it like the professional you are. Margaret Walsh, whose daughter Jennifer was an engineer at Boeing, had mentioned me to Jennifer several times. In November, Jennifer and I met for coffee after a joint engineering conference, and we discovered an immediate professional and personal compatibility. Jennifer was impressed by my systematic approach to the crisis with Rachel, viewing it as evidence of the same analytical thinking that made me successful in engineering. She was also drawn to my stability, career success, and the respect I commanded in our professional community. Most men would have handled this emotionally and made everything worse, she said during one of our early dates. You approached it like an engineering problem. Gather data, analyze the situation, implement a comprehensive solution. By December, the federal case against Tony and his co-conspirators was moving toward resolution. Tony had agreed to plead guilty to all charges in exchange for a recommended sentence of 18 months in federal prison, 2 years of supervised release, and $52,000 in restitution for the government time he'd stolen. Rachel and the other women had been offered plea deals for cooperation with the prosecution. Rachel's agreement involved a suspended sentence, 2 years of probation, community service, and $8,000 in fines and court costs. However, she would have a permanent federal criminal record that would appear in all future background checks. The local newspaper ran a follow-up story about the case resolution, again naming all the participants and detailing the sentences. The story was picked up by regional media and social media, ensuring that Rachel's and Tony's names would be permanently associated with the scandal. In our small suburban community, where reputation and social standing were important, both Rachel and Tony had become social pariahs. Former friends and neighbors avoided them, employers were reluctant to hire them, and their names had become synonymous with moral failure and criminal behavior. Christmas arrived with my life fundamentally transformed but significantly improved. The promotion at work had put me in a position of greater responsibility and recognition. My relationship with Jennifer was developing naturally into something serious and meaningful. The community that had supported me through the crisis continued to treat me with respect and friendship. I spent Christmas Eve at the church service I'd attended alone for the first time just 2 months earlier. This time, Jennifer was beside me, and we were welcomed warmly by the congregation as a couple with a promising future together. You've certainly turned a terrible situation into something positive, Reverend Williams commented after the service. Your strength and faith through this trial have been an inspiration to many of us. I just tried to handle the situation systematically and let the consequences fall where they belonged, I replied. That's wisdom, Michael. Too many people try to shield others from the natural consequences of their actions, but sometimes experiencing those consequences is the only way people learn and grow. Rachel spent Christmas working a retail shift at the mall, earning minimum wage while facing another year of probation and community service. Tony spent Christmas in federal prison, with 16 months remaining on his sentence. The affair that had lasted 3 months had destroyed 2 marriages, ended 2 careers, resulted in federal criminal convictions, and led to financial ruin for everyone involved except the person who had simply documented what was happening and allowed the natural consequences to unfold. On New Year's Eve, Jennifer and I attended a party hosted by colleagues from the aerospace industry. The conversation inevitably turned to the year's events, including my handling of the situation with Rachel. You know what impressed me most about your approach, said David Kim, a fellow senior engineer. You didn't try to get revenge. You just made sure everyone faced the appropriate consequences for their choices. That's exactly right, Jennifer added. Revenge would have been emotional and destructive. What Michael did was systematic and restorative. He restored integrity to the situation by ensuring accountability. As midnight approached and we prepared to welcome the new year, I reflected on how completely my life had changed since that Tuesday afternoon when the garage door opener had first made that grinding noise. The mechanical failure that had seemed like an inconvenience had actually been the catalyst for discovering and resolving a much more serious systemic problem. Without that breakdown, I might have remained unaware of Rachel's affair for months or even years longer, allowing much greater damage to accumulate. Instead, the early detection had allowed for swift, comprehensive resolution that protected my career, financial security, and social standing, while ensuring that everyone responsible for the deception faced appropriate consequences for their actions. At midnight, as Jennifer and I shared our first New Year's kiss, I realized that the systematic approach that had guided me through the crisis had also led me to a much better life overall. My career was advancing rapidly, my relationship was built on shared values and mutual respect, and my community standing was stronger than ever. 6 months later, in June, the final chapter of the story became clear. Tony Martinez was released from federal prison after serving 18 months, but his reintegration into society proved difficult. His criminal record made employment challenging, and he was limited to minimum wage jobs with employers willing to hire convicted felons. His ex-wife had remarried and moved to another state with their children, severely limiting his contact with them. He eventually found work as a stock clerk at a warehouse facility, earning less than half of his former postal salary with no benefits package. At age 37, he was starting over with no savings, no pension, no career prospects, and a federal criminal record that would follow him for life. Rachel's situation was similarly challenging. The federal conviction appeared on all background checks, limiting her employment options to minimum wage retail positions. She was unable to return to dental work, unable to afford anything better than her studio apartment, and socially isolated in a community where her name remained associated with scandal. Her probation officer required monthly meetings, community service obligations, and payment plans for court costs that consumed nearly 20% of her already minimal income. The financial strain was constant and overwhelming. Both had attempted to leave town and start fresh in other cities, but federal criminal records and garnished wages followed them wherever they went. The consequences of their 3-month affair would affect them for decades to come. Meanwhile, Jennifer and I had gotten engaged at Christmas, planning a wedding for the following spring. My promotion to department head had come with another significant salary increase, and we were looking at houses in the best suburban neighborhoods. The community that had supported me through the crisis with Rachel continued to treat us as a respected couple with a bright future. Our church had asked us to lead a marriage preparation class for engaged couples, viewing our relationship as an example of how mature adults build stable partnerships based on shared values. What I find remarkable about your story, Jennifer said one evening as we planned our wedding, is how you turned a personal betrayal into an opportunity for comprehensive improvement. The key was recognizing that the problem wasn't just the affair, I replied. The problem was systematic dishonesty, fraud, and misconduct that affected multiple people and institutions. Addressing just the affair would have left all the other issues unresolved. And now everyone involved has either been held accountable or protected from further harm. Exactly. The community is safer because a federal employee who was abusing his position has been removed and prosecuted. The Postal Service has better oversight procedures. Dr. Hendricks learned about employee fraud and strengthened her policies. Everyone learned something important about consequences and accountability. On our wedding day, in the same church where I'd been married to Rachel 14 years earlier, I reflected on how completely different this ceremony felt. Built on honesty, mutual respect, shared professional success, and community support. This marriage had a foundation of integrity that would withstand any challenges we might face. Reverend Williams, who had supported me through the crisis and watched my relationship with Jennifer develop, spoke about marriage as a covenant that required constant integrity and commitment from both partners. Michael and Jennifer have both demonstrated the character qualities that make marriages successful, he said during the ceremony. They've shown us how mature adults handle both crisis and commitment with systematic thinking and principled action. As Jennifer and I exchanged vows, promising to support each other through whatever challenges we might face, I realized that the garage door malfunction 18 months earlier had been the beginning of the best period of my life. The mechanical failure had revealed systematic problems that needed immediate attention. Addressing those problems comprehensively had protected everything I valued while opening doors to opportunities I'd never expected. Sometimes equipment breakdowns aren't just malfunctions to be repaired. Sometimes they're diagnostic alerts that much more significant maintenance is required, and the entire system needs to be upgraded for optimal performance. The garage door opener I'd installed 6 months ago was top-of-the-line equipment with advanced security features, remote monitoring, and preventive maintenance alerts. It would probably last 20 years with proper care. Much like the marriage I was beginning with Jennifer, engineered for reliability, built with quality materials, and designed to function optimally for decades to come. The grinding noise that had started this entire sequence of events was now just a distant memory, replaced by the smooth, quiet operation of systems that had been properly maintained and thoughtfully designed. Sometimes the best solutions require replacing everything, not just fixing what's obviously broken.